As soon as I hit record, she does. Oh, wait, there she is. Ah, there you
Okay.
go.
Okay.
Welcome back, Cynthia. All right. Would anybody who would like to read?
I'll start, but I'm not going to read all of it. Okay, I'll just start it. Okay.
Well, this is
Uh,
pretty short anyway. The
oh yeah,
Haftarah
the
is pretty
Haftarah I'll
short.
do. Okay. The
Yeah.
word of the Eternal came to me, saying, "Mortal, take a stick and write on it for Judah and Israelites associated with it, and take another stick and write on it Joseph's Ephraim stick and all the house of Israel associated with it. Bring them together, every one of them, as one stick. Then they may be as one in your hand. And when any of your people say to you, will you not tell us what you mean by what you are doing? Say to them, thus says the eternal God, behold, I am taking the stick of Joseph, which is in the hand of Ephraim, and the tribes of Israel associated with it, and placing them on him along with the stick of Judah, making them one stick, so they can become a single stick in my hand. Before their eyes, hold in your hand the sticks on which you have written, and tell them, thus says, excuse me, thus says the eternal God, behold, I'm about to take the people of Israel from the nations where they went. I will gather them from all around and bring them back to their soil. There, on the hills of Israel, I will make them into a single nation in the land with a single king to rule them. Never again shall they be two nations. Never again shall they be divided into two kingdoms. Never again shall they defile themselves with their idols, with their abominable images, and their other transgressions. I will save them from all their backslidings, wherein they have sinned, and I will purify them when they shall be my people, and I will be their God. My servant David shall rule them. They shall all have one shepherd. They shall follow my ordinances and faithfully keep my laws. They shall live in the land that I gave to my servant Jacob, the land of your ancestors. They, their children, and their children's children shall live there forever, and my servant David shall be their head forever. I will make a covenant of peace with them, an everlasting covenant with them. I will make them safe and increase their numbers, and place my sanctuary in their midst forever. My presence will be with them. I will be with I will be their God, and they shall be my people. And when my sanctuary remains among them, forever the nations shall know that I am the eternal who sanctifies Israel. This is very powerful.
Yeah.
If you really think about with just, I mean, he's actually saying, look at, you are my people. We always talk about, God chose it, but this is very powerful, I think.
And it fits, ties in with the portion because of the reuniting of like Joseph and
Yeah. But
his brothers.
it's interesting. I never read the Haftorah that much. So this is very interesting to me. Yeah.
Yeah, me neither, really.
I'm not
But
knowledgeable in Haftorahs except for the one I read for my bat
mm,
mitzvah. So
the
that's
one
it.
that
I
we
mean,
read, the one that we read about Solomon dividing that's a famous one. There are some,
yes.
but I'm just saying I myself don't. But I like doing it now, you know.
Yeah. So
Um,
that so that's it for this reading.
yeah, I mean, and a lot of it, it seems like a lot of the stuff from the prophets is really just like all this like poetry, you know.
Yeah.
It,
It is
it
poetry the way they present it. Yes,
yeah.
it's very
All
interesting.
right, so we'll go back now to if anybody else has any comment or glad that you're back, Cynthia. We lost you for a few seconds and then you pop back. Yeah. All right, let's see. Let me just here we go. All right. Okay. Would anybody else like to read? If not, I'm willing to start it. Dr.
Okay,
Ed, you wanna?
I can read for a little bit, just for a little
Okay.
bit.
Yep.
44:18, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
correct.
Yep.
Judah now approached him and said, by your leave, my lord, please give your servant a hearing, and do not let your anger flare up at your servant, for you are like Pharaoh. My lord asked his servants, do you have a father or a brother? And we said to my lord, we have an aged father, and the young boy of his age, whose full brother is dead. He alone was left of his mother, and so his father loves him all the more. You then said to your servants, bring him down here to me, and let me lay my eyes on him. But we said to my lord, the lad cannot leave his father. If he leaves his father, he will die. And then said you to your servants, if your youngest brother doesn't come down with you, you'll never see my face again. So when we went up to your servant, my father, we related to him my Lord's words. And when our father said, go back and buy us a bit of food, we said, we can't go down. Only if our youngest brother is with us will we go down. For we won't be allowed to see the man's face unless our youngest brother is with us. Your servant, my father, then said to us, you know that of the two my wife bore me, one is gone from my side. And I said, surely he's been ripped to shreds. I haven't seen him to this day. And if you take this one too from me, and some calamity befalls him, you shall lower my gray head in woe to Sheol. And now, if I go to your servant, my father, and the lad whose whole being is bound up in his, is not with us, and he sees that the lad is not there, he will die. And your servants will have lowered your servant, our father's gray head, in anguish to Sheol. What is Sheol?
I think it's supposed to mean hell. It's supposed
That's
to
what I
be
thought.
like,
I thought that too. I actually think it
yeah,
does mean hell. Yeah.
I thought we didn't believe in hell.
Well,
I don't,
kind of like not hell and heaven the way a Christian does, but that wherever you go after you die, it's not a great place to be, you know?
yeah, Rabbi Kudan talked about it before.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's,
All right. For your servants made himself responsible for the lad to my father, saying, if I don't bring him back to you, I will stand guilty before my father for all time. So now please let your servant remain as my lord's slave in place of the lad, and let the lad go home with his brothers. For how can I go home to my father without the lad, and thus see the harm my father will suffer? Should I continue?
could I say something first?
Sure.
Um, this is supposed to be considered like one of the most heroic stories in the Torah. And when you look at um, Judah and how he's grown from the time that it was his he was one of the ones who came up with the idea of selling Joseph into slavery. And he was also involved, in allowing his father to be bereaved of Joseph, letting him think that he was ripped to pieces. And now here he is offering himself to Joseph in place of Benjamin. And a lot of the commentators say that it's because since the time that Judah was involved in the plot with Joseph, he himself had and lost two of his sons.
Oh,
So now he knew what it was like to feel the anguish of losing children. So now he understood better, and now he didn't want his father to go through that again. But I'm just
interesting.
throwing that out there. But it's
Interesting.
considered, yeah, it's considered one of the most heroic, moving stories in the Torah. Judah's
Interesting.
offering himself, like in place of Benjamin, like he's totally, and he's not the oldest son. I
No.
think he's the fourth oldest. Shimon and Levi are older than him, and I forget. But Shimon is already being held anyway. So it's just pretty interesting. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay. So Joseph could
What?
no longer restrain himself before all who were standing in attendance on him. So he cried, send everyone away from me, so that no one else was there when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. He gave a voice to a loud wail, and the Egyptians heard. Pharaoh's place heard. Joseph then said to the brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father really alive? But his brothers were able to answer him. They recoiled in fear of him. Joseph went on to say to his brothers, "Come, draw near to me." So they drew near. He said, "I am Joseph, your brother, who you sold to Egypt. And now you don't be troubled, don't be chagrined because you sold me here. For it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. There have already been 2 years of famine in the land, and there remain 5 more years without plowing or harvest. So God sent me ahead of you to assure your survival in the land and to keep you alive for a great deliverance. So it's not you who sent me here, but God who made me a father to Pharaoh, a lord of all his household, a ruler of the whole land of Egypt. Hurry back, hurry back up to my father and say to him, Thus says your son Joseph, God has made me a lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not delay. You can settle in the land of Goshen and be near to me, you, your children, and your children's children, your flocks and herds, and all that you own. I will sustain you there, for there remain 5 more years of famine, so that you and your household and all that you own are not impoverished. Look, you can see with your eyes, and so call my brother Benjamin, that it's my mouth speaking to you. Tell my father how they honor me in Egypt, and all that you have seen. Hurry up and bring my father down here. He then fell weeping upon his brother Benjamin's neck, and Benjamin wept on his neck. He kissed all his brothers and wept with them. Only after this could his brothers respond to him. And the report was heard in Pharaoh's place, Joseph's brothers are alive. And this pleased Pharaoh and his couriers. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, say to your brothers, do this, load up your beasts and head straight for the land of Canaan, and take your father and your households and come to me. I will give you the best that the land of Egypt offers. Come eat the fat of the land. Moreover, you're instructed to say, do this, take wagons from the land of Egypt for your little ones and your wives, and convey your father and come. And don't look with regret at your household goods, because the best that the whole land of Egypt offers is yours. Israel's sons said about doing this. Joseph provided them with wagons at Pharaoh's command, and he gave them provisions for the journey. To each he furnished a change of clothing, but to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of clothing. And to his father he sent some 10 asses laden with fine Egyptian goods, and 10 she-asses carrying grain, bread, and food to his father for the road. He sent his brothers forth, and as they were going, he said to them, don't be anxious along the way. They went up from Egypt and came to the land of Canaan to Jacob and his father. When they told him Joseph is alive and that he held sway over the whole land of Egypt, his heart froze, for he could not believe them. But when they told him all that Joseph had spoken to them, and when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to convey him, their father Jacob's spirit came alive. Israel said, enough, my son Joseph is alive. I must go and see him before I die. Israel and all his company set off on their journey, and they came to Beersheba, where he offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. Interesting. God addressed Israel in a night vision, saying, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, here I am. God said, I am God, the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make you a great people there. I myself will go down with you to Egypt, and I will most surely bring you back up as well. And Joseph will lay his hand upon your eyes. Jacob then moved up on to Beersheba. His sons of Israel lifted Jacob, their father, the little ones, and the wives onto the wagons that Pharaoh had sent to carry him. They took their livestock and the possessions they had amassed in the land of Canaan and they came to Egypt, Jacob and all his progeny with him. His sons and his sons' sons were with him, his daughters and his sons' daughters, all progeny that he brought with him to Egypt. These are the names of Israel's sons who can who came to Egypt, Jacob's and his sons, and he goes through all this. Gary, interesting.
Yeah, yeah. It's like I keep thinking like I don't like what I don't know if I mentioned I was saying this last week or the week before. Um, like I think in the Bible, like Joseph is considered to be a tzaddik. So you look at like a lot of things about him. I still think that going back to when he was younger, like when it's talked about maybe his father loved him more and that made the others jealous. And maybe the reports that he brought back to his father about the others weren't good reports. But maybe they were honest. And maybe even though he had the dream that he had and he told them about, and maybe it seemed arrogant and maybe it made them very angry, obviously. But you see, it came to pass. So the dream that he had was meant to be. So in some ways, you can't really say it's arrogance. It's just like with like Jacob stealing away Esau's birthright. It seems like a terrible deception, and yet it ultimately turns out apparently that that's what God wanted.
But and this is also really interesting, and I acknowledge that. Uh,
Yeah.
God says, I'll make you a great people there. I will go down with you to Egypt, and I will most surely bring you back up as well. In saying
Mhm.
that, so God had already said, if stuff happens down there, I'm going to get you. So this wasn't new to Moses. This has been already written that God
Yeah,
promised.
that's what I was
Right,
thinking. I agree with you. This
right.
was, here I was thinking it had to do with Moses, but this was a prophecy way before Moses.
It
And then
was
think
a
about this. I will go down with you to Egypt, and I will most surely bring you back up as well. So when they bring Jacob's bones back to
Yep,
Israel,
Yeah,
he already said, "You- You're coming back, dead or
yep,
alive."
yeah,
yep,
interesting. So it but
yep.
so also that's was meaning that they weren't going to be staying in Egypt for the rest of their life. That's what the
That's
thing.
correct.
Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. That's
That,
very important. Yeah.
that's very important too. So all of the stuff, maybe Moses didn't do really that much. God had already promised that.
But God, how does God act though? Through people. Like Moses was just what God used.
He's a
I
conduit
mean,
in the whole thing.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
God used, because God kept telling Moses like that, I'm with you, and if you can't speak, Aaron will say the words,
But
and
Moses knew that he wasn't going to fail because God had already said, I'm going to do this." So you think
right.
Moses is gambling here. He's not gambling. He's already got God's word.
Yeah, but
The other thing,
I don't know if he knew all that at this time, though.
I don't
I mean,
know.
we don't
but
know. We don't.
whether he did or didn't, though, it was already God already had said
Right.
that that's what
God,
would
God
happen.
already knew, but I don't know if Moses knew. See, what I'm trying to say
Right.
is that God knew and he talked to these people at that time, but Moses wasn't in the picture then. So he
God
might not
had to
have known.
convince Moses, and then Moses had to
That's
convince
right.
the
So
people.
what I'm saying is that when Moses came into being, he didn't know this whole prophecy, is what I'm saying.
Right, right.
That's my
And
personal.
the other thing that's really incredible too is the fact that again with Joseph's brothers even like the fact that like that he didn't apparently you don't see any place where he had any hatred or anything toward his brothers even like
Right.
when he first got thrown in the pit and everything
Yeah.
you don't hear anything about that and then when they come back instead of like he had all this power he could have punished them he could have had you know what I'm saying
Yeah, could have
instead
gotten
he
even
tells
with
them
them. Yeah. Right.
instead he tells them oh don't worry about it don't feel it was
Yeah.
god sent me here to save lives
Right.
this was all God's plan and
Right.
to me it seems like Joseph is decent all along he resists the sexual advances of his boss's wife he
Yeah, but
doesn't
think
have
about
the Well, yeah, maybe. We don't know that,
We
but
really don't know.
yeah. Um, and but he just, to me, like, again, like at the beginning, we're kind of led to believe almost like, and maybe I'm wrong, but like that Joseph starts out as this little whiny, spoiled kid who rats on his brothers or whatever. But as I was saying, we don't know. The Torah said that he gave like these bad reports about his brothers, but maybe they were accurate. Maybe they were
Yeah,
accurate.
we
And
don't
of course,
know.
even if they were, so they'd still hate him, you
Yeah.
You
know?
know, on the other hand, accurate or not, they threw them in a pile, they sold them. Look,
Yep.
you know, I would have whacked them. But anyway,
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like that, you look at that. That's what I'm saying. You look at their personalities versus his.
Right.
They grew to
But
hate
do
him.
you
They
ever
had
notice that there's
jealousy.
always, do you ever notice that in every family, though, there's always one person who's much more understanding than some of the others? I mean, I find it in my own family that way. I find that there's much more understanding about one person than another. I think that happens in families, that there's one that
But
understands better.
but you see how they also, in other words, Joseph didn't live with hatred and a desire for revenge toward his
Right,
brothers.
right,
But
right,
they lived from the time they did what they did, apparently, they lived with the fear now that, like, this guy is making us do this. This is happening because of what we did to our brother.
right,
Now
right,
look
right,
remember when they were saying that? Now look what's happening to us. See, this is because we did what we did.
right.
Like, so they had that hanging over them. Like, they were afraid. Like, they had to live with all that hanging over them. But Joseph didn't. We don't see any place like when Joseph got to like the prison. He didn't tell me, oh yeah, yeah. Well, I ended up here basically because my SOB brothers, they hated my guts because my dad loved me more than them, and they dumped me into the spit, and they let him think, that I'm dead. His brothers let their father think that his beloved son was dead. That's the type of people they were, as opposed to the way Joseph is. I think it's incredible,
Right.
kind of. You know,
all
Yeah.
right, let's
I don't
go.
know.
We're
All
past
right.
15 now. Can you give me the next
Y-
page?
All right. Oh, do we? Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay,
It's all
there we go.
people's sons and all that stuff.
I think it keeps going. Yeah, all
Oh
the
yeah,
people who came,
all the
but there
children.
might be. I think there's more after that, though. Let me just say.
Okay.
Uh,
It said, all the people who came with the Jacob to Egypt, who came forth from his loins, apart from the wives of Jacob's sons, were 66 people in all. And the sons of Joseph bore to him in Egypt were two individuals, the members of Jacob's family who came to Egypt were 70 in all.
Interesting. Okay.
Judah he sent ahead of him to Joseph to show him the way to Goshen. So they came to the wagon of Goshen. Joseph
Egypt.
harnessed his chariots and went up to meet his father Israel in Goshen. He presented himself to him and threw himself on his neck, weeping all the time. Israel said to Joseph, now that I've seen your face, for you're still alive, I can die at last.
Hooray.
Joseph said to his brothers and to his father's household, I'm going to go up and tell the Pharaohs. I will say to him, my brothers and my father's household, who were in the land of Canaan, have come to me. The men are shepherds. In fact, they are breeders of livestock, and they have brought their flocks and their herds and all that they own. Therefore, when Pharaoh sends for you and asks, what do you do? Say, your servants have been breeding livestock from youth onwards to now, both our households and our fathers' households, in order that you may live in the region of Goshen, for Egyptians find shepherds abhorrent.
Why
Joseph
is
went.
that?
Joseph
Okay.
Joseph then went to and told Pharaoh, saying, my fathers and my brothers and their flocks, their herds, and all that they own have arrived from the land of Canaan, and now they're in the region of Goshen. Out of his brothers he picked 5 men and presented them before Pharaoh. When Pharaoh said to his brothers, what do you do? They said to Pharaoh, your servants are shepherds, both our households and our fathers' households. They went on to say to Pharaoh, we have come to stay in the land because there is no pasture for use for your servants' flocks, for your famine is oppressed in the land of Canaan. Now we ask you to let your servants settle in the region of Goshen. Pharaoh then said to Joseph, now that your father and brothers have reached you, the land of Egypt is before you. Settle your father and brothers in the best part of the land. Let them settle in the regions of Goshen. And if you know any able man among them, make them overseers of my livestock. Joseph had brought his father Jacob and stood him before Pharaoh, and Jacob greeted Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Jacob, how many years have you lived? And Jacob said to Pharaoh, the span of the years of my life have been 130. Few and miserable have been the days of the years of my life. They have not attained to the length of days of the years of my fathers when they were alive. Jacob then gave Pharaoh a parting blessing, and he left Pharaoh's presence. Joseph settled his father and his brothers and gave them a holding in the land of Egypt, in the best part of the land, in the region of Ramses, as Pharaoh had commanded. Joseph also provided food for his father and his brothers, and all his father's household according to the number of their children. At this time, no food was to be had in the entire land, for the famine bore down very heavily. The land of Egypt and the land of Canaan languished on account of the famine. Joseph now collected all the silver found in the lands of Egypt and Canaan as payment for the grain that the people were buying, and Joseph brought that silver into Pharaoh's palace. When the silver in the lands of Egypt and Canaan was spent, all Egypt flocked to Joseph, saying, let us have food. Why should we drop dead in front of you because the silver exhausted? Joseph replied, bring your livestock, and I will give it to you in exchange for your livestock. I will give it to you in exchange for your. Bring your livestock, and I will give it to you in exchange for your livestock. Oh, if the silver is exhausted. They therefore brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them food in exchange for horses, holdings of sheep and cattle and asses. That year he kept them alive with food in exchange for all their livestock. That year ended, and they approached him in the following year and said to him, we will not hide from you, my lord, that the silver is spent and our animal holdings belong to my lord. There's nothing left before my lord but our bodies and our soil. Why should we die before your eyes, both we and our soil? Buy us and our soil in exchange for food. We and our soil will be slaves to Pharaoh. Distribute seed so we can live and not die, so the land is not deserted. Joseph then bought all the land in Egypt for Pharaoh, and each Egyptian had sold his field because the famine was overwhelmed them. Thus the land came into Pharaoh's possession, and thus he made serfs of the people from one end of the Egyptian border to the other. Only the land belonging to the priests did he not buy, for the priests had an allowance from Pharaoh, and they ate their allotted portion that Pharaoh had given them. They therefore did not sell their land. Ready? Do I continue?
Do you want to, or do you want somebody
You want
else
a
to? Do you
break?
want me to?
Now Joseph then said to the people, see now that I brought you and your land for Pharaoh. Here is seed for you. Sow the land. When the harvest comes, you must give Pharaoh a fifth, and the other 4 portions will be yours for seeding the land to be food for you and your households, and for your little ones to eat. And they said, you have given us life. May we find favor in the Lord's sight and be serfs to Pharaoh. Joseph made this law to this day for Egypt's soil. 1/5 is Pharaoh's. The priest's land alone did not become Pharaoh's. Israel thus settled in the land of Egypt, in the region of Goshen. They struck roots in it. They were fruitful and multiplied greatly.
Wow.
But I
Wild.
want to ask, which it kind of is confusing to me. When did we become slaves? It looks like we have this kind of nice rapport with Pharaoh, you know?
Well,
Because
that's
when they say when Joseph dies, and they
Yeah.
said people forgot who Joseph was
Oh,
yep.
right. That's right.
and
That's
what
right.
he
Yeah.
did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
lost. They didn't keep their heritage, like, and it was forgotten.
Oh,
And
right.
then the new pharaoh didn't know who, and then the new pharaoh's like, oh my God, like these people are so numerous. Like, if anything, if we were ever to go to war, they could join the side against us. And
Yeah.
that's when he got
I
scared
remember
and
now. Yeah, I forgot that.
yeah.
Yeah, right. That's right. Yeah.
But
That's
there
why it's
again,
so
like,
important. It's important for me to read this every year because I sometimes have a short-term memory problem.
yeah, but you learn something every year though. Like when
Yeah,
you
you
read it
do. You
over,
do.
there's always
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
it's
absolutely.
absolutely amazing. This is
Thank
the
you, Ed.
first.
That was a lot of reading, but I appreciated
Yeah,
you doing it tonight. I
yes.
wasn't in the mood for reading too much, so I appreciate
No,
it. Yeah.
I haven't read in the past. Ruth, I wanted to tell you before I hung up because I got to leave early tonight. Is
Okay.
that the choir was magnificent Friday night. I
Thank
so much
you.
enjoyed, and we had some people considering joining the temple.
Yeah, we
And
actually got new members that night. We actually got two new members.
yeah, members who were part of Temple Tifereth Israel years ago and left and
Uh-huh.
went to Chelmsford. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you, they're coming back, and he's a real go-getter. And they were so impressed with Friday night. I was just so upbeat all weekend. The choir
That's
did such.
nice. Well, I'll tell you, we had a rehearsal and we really did a lot with the rounds this time, and people really noticed it. We did a lot with rounds, if you noticed, and that was more than we've ever done before. And
And
it
I
was,
said
I
to
think, yeah. Go ahead.
and I said to my brother Phil, I said, Phil, they sang a song in Yiddish that
Yes, we
came
did. Yeah.
from Bosnia. He came from Sarajevo, Bosnia.
That's right. That's
And
true. Yeah.
my brother spent 8 years in Bosnia on the bench with the
Oh,
United
wow.
Nations. He was a judge in Bosnia for the
Oh,
criminal.
was your brother there that night? Was your brother there?
No, but I asked
Oh,
him about this singer, this not singer,
oh,
this composer. He says,
oh,
yes, I know her.
oh,
I met
yeah.
her. He says, yeah, I met her. She's for the last 25 years she was living in the United States. She married a USGI in the 1940s.
Yeah. Yeah,
Anyway,
we only had one rehearsal for that concert. We only had one rehearsal, and we did
it
all
was
those songs. Yeah,
very nice.
yeah,
It was very
nice.
nice evening.
Thank you. We enjoyed it. We enjoyed it ourselves. It was really nice, and of course, Sarah did a beautiful job with the recorder too. You know, that was really nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the woman's name was Yagoda. Her name is Jagoda Flori.
Yeah, we had it on the music, right? I just didn't remember.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and Philip.
don't ask me anything with names. I'm completely gone with names now.
Well,
I really think something's
well,
happening to my head.
Philip
Okay.
is Philip is considered royalty in Bosnia.
Wow, that's pretty great.
He was knighted in Cambodia, but they consider him royalty